Kokemachine for real fishing. Welcome to the first edition of Kokemachine's Legendary Lures. So throughout my life, especially in my childhood, I've had a few lures that in my mind have reached somewhat of a legendary status. First lure that I'm going to talk about is probably the most legendary lure that I've ever used in my life. It's called the Rebel Crickhopper. As you can see, this guy is a bright yellow grasshopper looking guy. It's an ultralight lure, usually meant for like really small rods. A lot of people think of it as more of a panfish lure, and don't get me wrong, it definitely works for panfish, but it also works for just about every single other thing that has ever swam. What makes this lure such a legendary lure is that I bought this when I was a little kid, maybe like 10 or something, and then shortly after I purchased this particular lure, they changed up production and they started putting bigger beads in it where it used to have a very small bead. So the small bead had a very high pitch rattle, whereas the bigger bead was a little more of a low pitch rattle, and it never worked as good as this original lure. So I had this lure in my tackle box for like ages and ages. And because I knew there was no replacement for it, I only whipped it out when the fishing was like absolutely horrible. I might be fishing for a whole week and the fishing was terrible, and then I'm like, that's it, the Crickhopper's coming out. And it always worked. It always worked great. It dives about 4 feet. It's got that rattle. I've had good success with the black ones, but the yellow ones were always the best for me. Caught trout, bass, walleye, pike, all kinds of panfish, you name it. They all loved this thing. Like, I don't know what they thought it was, because I don't know if you've noticed, but when grasshoppers hit the water, they don't dive 5 feet and wobble around. They would just sit on the surface. But this thing always worked the best for me when I was cranking it like a crankbait. What a fantastic lure. This one's lost like most of its paint. It's seen some days, let me tell you. I've had it snagged in all sorts of crazy places, but I've always like put my utmost effort into getting it out, and I always got it back. Because you were extra careful, because you knew this was the last one you might ever see with that small rattle in it. The funny thing is that instead of losing it in a tree or on a snag or anything like that, the plastic on the back popped out and the hook came out. It's not the end of the universe. This lure was due for retirement, and I guess I could still fish it with the front hook, but at the same time, if the plastic's breaking, I assume the whole thing's gonna break. And I don't want to break it now. I need to get this thing like framed. So when I was a little, probably like 10 to like 15, this was my absolute go-to lure if things were tight. I went to like places where the trout weren't biting anything. Everybody's like, you gotta have worms or you gotta have some kind of bait. And then I'd whip this guy out and boom, fish on, fish on, fish on. So that's why that lure is the first of my legendary lures. And I wish Rebel would remake the lure with a smaller rattle, but whatever. I've almost completely stopped using these lures since they changed the rattle. That's how much of a difference it's made. And now that it's been somewhat destroyed by time, it is now just something I put up on my wall to sit and think about all the sweet fish that I caught when I was a kid. Anyway, I'm sure you guys have your own lures of legendary status. Maybe you can drop me a comment below and we can talk about your favorite lures of present times and times gone past. So we'll talk to you guys soon. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share, because that helps my channel grow. Thanks a lot. Talk to you guys later.